Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to Espresso with Sky, giving you a fresh perspective on faith, life, God, and the Bible. I am Pastor Sky, but I don't have my sidekicks. And actually, I don't have my lighting, I don't have my mic, and I don't even have my camera. I'm using my phone at this time. So I am not in my studio, obviously. I am here in Vancouver, Canada, in my parents' home. I'm just visiting for a bit before I head out once again. So super thankful and grateful for all of you guys joining us here today. I've been away from my studio for over 10 months, which means that all the videos you've seen until now, all of them were made in Malaysia 10 months ago. What's even crazier is I made 40 videos in 30 days. My last 30 days in Malaysia, I made all those videos that have lasted all the way until now. And now I am making new videos and new content over here in Vancouver, Canada. Just bear with it for a little bit. I'm not gonna be here forever. So thank you so much once again. What I wanna talk about today especially is all the, we've been through a lot over the last 2 years. And things just keep getting worse and worse, it feels. Like we went through the pandemic, 2 years. We lost our jobs, we lost our economy, we lost our lives. And then all of a sudden we have this Ukraine and Russia, like this war going on, food shortages. And then now, I'm sure some of you heard last week, there was like another mass school shooting in America, over there in Texas. And there was like 19 children that died, 7 to 10 years old. And when we think about this, it's such a tragedy to think that this type of thing would be happening. And it just feels so overwhelming that on top of all these crazy things, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I know that a lot of people are struggling, especially, my condolences out to all the families who lost their children, right? At such a young age. I can't imagine what they're going through. And what I wanted to talk about today was 3 ways that God is going to help you to overcome these situations, right? And there's going to be a couple of misunderstandings that people are going to have how God helps us, and that's why I want to talk about this today. Now, there's a verse that many people use to comfort people in their difficult times, to encourage them, but a lot of times, if we don't know the verse or the scriptures really well, it can actually backfire and hurt people even more. And this verse that I've seen a lot even now it's 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, and it's a great verse. It's like, God is faithful, and He will not let anyone get tempted beyond what they can bear, right? We've heard this before. We have. God will not let you go through something beyond what you can bear. Now, when you think about this, it is quite comforting, like, wow, that's so amazing, God. But what happens when you go through something more than you can bear? And one of the things that can happen is misunderstandings cause us to misunderstand God, or misunderstand each other, misunderstand ourselves. Like, think about this. Imagine you really believe that, but you go through something so difficult. You're like, oh no, is my faith that weak that I can't overcome this when God won't give me anything more than I can bear? Or you look at God and say, God, you told me you wouldn't give me anything more than I can bear. And we start to misunderstand God. And what we see here is, what does this verse actually mean? And this verse is not saying that nothing is going to be more than you can now bear. Look at what's happening in the world right now. There are many things bigger than what people can endure. Now, you might think to me and say, well, Sky, but aren't you going against the Bible? No, what I want to first tell you is we need to put this verse into context. And in context, this verse sounds like it says there's nothing too difficult, right? It sounds like it. However, Paul wrote this verse, but he also wrote 2 Corinthians, and there's a verse there where Paul talks about going through difficulties more than he could bear. Where is that? That's in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 through 9. Now, what does it say here? It says, we don't want anyone to be uninformed, but brothers and sisters, the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia, we were under great pressure far beyond our ability to endure, that we despaired and even thought we were going to die. That's what Paul himself was saying. After he said, oh, you're not going to get anything beyond what you can bear. And then he's like, oh yeah, we went through something. It was far beyond what we could even endure. But what Paul says at the very end is the most important part. He says, but this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but we will rely on God. Right? That's the key there. The key that Paul was giving to us is, yeah, we're going to go through some things in life that are far beyond what we can bear. Can you imagine if it was your child that died in the shooting? Can you imagine if it's, your parents or grandparents that died in COVID? Like, there's so many things, even in the Ukraine. Imagine you had parents in the Ukraine. There's many people that do have relatives there. All this is going on. Is all of that going to be something that you can bear alone? No. If everything in life was bearable, then why would we need God? Why would we need to rely on God? The one thing that we have to understand that's so clear is that our life that we're living right now is not a life we live alone, but it's a life we live together in love. And this is something that we can never forget. What is love? Love is something that is so powerful that it endures all the hardships, all the difficulties, and you never let go. You never change. And that love always remains. What we need to understand in this time is that when we go through these difficulties, this is the time we need to rely on God even more. Now, when we rely on God and when we get close to God and we hold tightly to Him, let me tell you about 3 ways that God helps us to overcome these difficulties that we can't endure. The first way that God can help us overcome these difficulties, trials, and tribulations that are beyond what we can endure is by resolving those issues for us. Let me give you a good example. There was King Hezekiah in the Bible, surrounded by the Assyrians. They're being laid under siege. And he holds tightly onto God. And then the angel of death goes through the Assyrian army and wipes out like 180,000 troops, and they all run away. This is God solving the problem for us. But we know in life, not everything is solvable. For instance, if your child died in the shooting, how is that solvable? You can't get your child back. It's not a solvable thing, which means that situation doesn't apply to you. This second way that God helps us to overcome is He strengthens our heart. He strengthens our mind and allows us to endure and bear through the difficult times. And a lot of us are going through that right now. We can't change the situation, but God allows us to do what? He allows us to bear through it and endure. There's one person, I think we just talked about him, is Paul. Paul is the classic example where he says he held tightly onto God. It was only about Jesus. It was only about Christ and everything. Just looking at Him, knowing that the grace and the love came upon him, he was able to endure. And what did he go through? He went to prison multiple times. He was stoned. And those of you guys don't know how stonings happened in Israel back in those days. It's not just people throwing rocks at you. At the very end, someone comes with a large rock to end it. And even then, Paul still survived. He was whipped 39 lashes, like 5 times over. He went through the most crazy difficulties and he had to bear so much. But what happened? Because he relied on God, he was able to go through it because God was with him. And that's the second reason, or the second way, how God helps us through the difficulties. The third way that God helps us to overcome difficulties is actually much different than you think. He actually makes us avoid it. And we're like, what? What are you talking about? Yes, there are times God allows us to get through it by making us completely avoid it. Like, even in my life, I've been through times where I was driving in Germany, it started to rain, we pulled over a restaurant, and for some reason, we started playing a card game. We played cards for like 2 hours. When we finally got back out and we started to drive again, there was like a 12-car pileup, an accident because of the rain. And when we found out, that accident was happening at the same time when we pulled over. Yeah, He helped us to avoid it. And to avoid it, yeah, He might inspire us to go into a rest area, but there's sometimes He'll even tell us to run away from it. And you're like, what? God's telling us to run away? Yeah. If you look at 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 through 6, there's a situation where Elijah's about to get killed from the king. And then he's like, God, what should I do? And God's like, run and hide. He's like, and then Elijah runs away and he hides from the king. Sometimes God tells us to run and hide. And this is one of the things that people don't really talk about, because we think to ourselves, in order to be with God, which means we face everything and we'll punch and we'll scratch and then we'll do it until death. No, that's not the only thing God wants. Think about the time when Christians were being persecuted after Jesus died. First 400 years, in the first century, second century, third century, 400 years of Christian persecution after Jesus died. So where were they having their services? Guess what? In the catacombs. They were hiding so that people couldn't find them. God helped them to avoid the difficulties. And these are 3 different ways that God helps us. But we have to realize, how am I going to know which is which? Well, it comes back to the key point that Paul gave in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. He says, why did we go through this, right? It's so that we may not rely on ourselves, but rely on God. And one thing we really have to do in this time together is to rely even more on God. We've got to pray. We've got to meet with our brothers and sisters. We have to pray together. We have to read the words, be comforted by the words, understand them really well. And when we can do this, we'll be connected to God, and we'll know when God inspires us to overcome. When God inspires and helps us to strengthen our hearts so that we can overcome the difficulties. And the last one also, know that this is real. Sometimes God is telling us to avoid and run away from a situation. Why? Because it's not worth it, or it's something is not your time to go through it yet. All right? So I'm really grateful and thankful for all of you joining us here today. I hope that this video helped out a lot of you guys when it comes to these difficult times we're going through and the 3 different ways that God helps us to overcome. Everyone have an amazing, awesome day. This is Pastor Sky with Espresso with Sky. Everyone, see you guys again next week. Bye-bye.